And then good morning, Nigeria. Today we shall discuss Nigeria's first procurement policy for local growth.
All right. Nigerians welcomed the phrase Nigeria First this week. Of course, it indicates that the drive to buy locally made goods is now official in government procurement processes.
That's true, Victor. And the Nigeria First policy is prioritizing the use of locally made goods and services in all government procurements. The policy mandates ministries, departments and agencies to prioritize local content in all procurement processes. So
this implies essentially that Nigerian industries will now take center stage in government procurement activities, with foreign alternatives only considered when local capacity is apparently inadequate.
Now, some have described it as an answered prayer because it will revitalize local industries, promote self-reliance, boost productivity and drive sustainable economic growth.
They also believe it will create jobs, encouraging innovation, boost investor confidence in local products, enhance entrepreneurship and reduction in dependency on imports, promote economic liberation and self-determination.
Well, President Bola Tinubu, with this policy in place, contractors will no longer act as mere middlemen importing foreign goods into the country, while local factories lie idle.
And the President directed the Bureau of Public Procurement to revise and strictly enforce procurement guidelines to give preference to Nigerian products and solutions.
Well, the BBP is to also establish a local content compliance framework to guide all federal procurements while maintaining a comprehensive register of high-quality Nigerian manufacturers and service providers regularly patronized by the government.
And all MDAs, of course, that's ministries, departments and agencies, have been directed to immediately audit and revise their procurement plans in line with the Nigeria First policy. Now, the policy indicates that any breach will attract sanctions, including cancellation of procurement processes and disciplinary action against responsible officers.
Well, we have our guest joining us today to speak on the Nigeria First policy, which from all indications is a critical part of the renewed hope agenda. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria today. I'm RHA.
And I'm Victor, as we are reaching you live on the network service of the NTA. We'll begin with the morning news, and thereafter we will take a look at today's newspapers. Of course, Musa Abubakar is sitting by, I don't want to say standing by, for the day.
Nigeria First economic policy is prioritizing the use of locally manufactured goods and services in all government procurements. This policy means Nigeria comes first in all procurement processes. No foreign goods or devices that are already being produced locally will be procured without a clear and justified reason. The Nigeria First policy is designed to empower local industries, reduce reliance on import, and anchor government spending on domestic capacity. This seeks to foster a new business culture that will be bold, confident, but also very Nigerian, by seeking to make government invest in her people and homegrown industries, changing how the government spends money, how it procures, and how to also build the economy. The Nigerian industries will take precedence in all procurement processes, and where local supply falls short, contracts will be structured to build capacity domestically. President Tinubu's objective is to drive industrialization, insulating the economy from global disruptions and boosting local production in the country. The Federal Executive Council directed the Bureau of Public Procurement to revise and enforce fresh guidelines to favor local manufacturers and service providers, locally made goods and homegrown solutions. It has also been directed to create what is called a local content compliance framework for all government procurement. The BPP is also to maintain a register of high-quality Nigerian manufacturers and service providers regularly engaged by the federal government, while all the procurement officers posted to MDS will be reverted to the Bureau of Public Procurement as a line agency without jeopardizing the possibility of efficiency. What is the prospect of Nigeria-first economic policy? How will it change the narrative of Nigeria's procurement process? And what role is the Bureau of Public Procurement expected to play in the actualization of the policy? This and more will form part of questions guests on Good Morning Nigeria will find answers to.
All right, many thanks, Ibrahim Bello Gunda, for that background report. And to get into our conversation on the Nigeria First policy, let me introduce our guests here with us in the studio. And I'll begin with Chibuzo Ekwekuo, who is of the Ahaneku and Ekwekuo Law Partnership. He's a lawyer and public procurement specialist. A pleasure to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Let me also introduce Nelson Hundubofore, who is a senior procurement consultant, Campfield Limited and procurement management firm. He's also of the World Bank Assisted Agile Project. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
All right, it's also a pleasure to welcome right here in the studio Professor Bola Afolabi, a senior procurement specialist, consultant, sustainable procurement, environment and social standard enhancement, and Bureau of Public Procurement and World Bank Project. Many thanks for joining us.
It's a great pleasure.
For joining us.
All right, let's begin this conversation, perhaps with some context. Now, let me begin with Chibuzo Ekwekuo. Given your experience, how significant would you say the Nigeria First policy is in the evolution of public procurement in Nigeria?
I think it's a very important objective. It is something we should have focused on more effectively much earlier than now. That is not to say previous governments have not taken steps in this direction. The executive order, I think number 5, of which was issued at the interim period the former Vice President, Professor Sibanjo, acted, did deal with this issue. The problem, however, was that at that time, government did not really go forward with a full implementation of that policy. So it's wonderful to see that the current government is revisiting it. At this time when we have very high unemployment levels, at this time when a lot of our young people who are yearning to have things to do, our public resources cannot be funding comprehensively foreign companies without supporting a local company. So this is a very, very important objective to focus on. I think what we need to do is look at how to ensure that this time there is full implementation. We're lucky to have a new DG at the Bureau for Public Procurement who understands what it takes to implement this policy, because public procurement can be a very important tool to drive local production. It can be a very important tool to draw investment into the country. It is a very important tool to establish standards of goods, works and products that we receive into the country. And so I think this is a good opportunity, and we need to work on it. There are things to be done to make it work, effective, productive, and to have very good outcomes.
All right, many thanks, Mr. Ekwekuo, for your opening comments. I'd like to get to Professor Afolabi now. You're a senior procurement specialist, and listening to Mr. Ekwekuo speak, he talked about full implementation. This is not the first time we're hearing about policy like this. Buy Nigeria, do all everything that's about Nigeria first. But somehow it looks like most times is a bottom top approach, but never gets to the top. It's always about the bottom people, buying Nigeria, while those at the top just continue to do all the things that they do outside the country. Now, speak to us really. What do you think about this new, policy by the Renewed Hope agenda, and if you think that full implementation is possible?
Thank you. Indeed, I think the first thing I'd like to say is I'd like to congratulate Nigerians, including myself, I believe we are lucky to have a strategic thinker in our president and the entire federal government of Nigeria who actually look at strategic initiatives. Saying buy Nigeria is a big deal. Procurement itself is a big deal. And people do not realize this. I've been in this profession for more than 35 years. I'm a global specialist, especially with a forte in the oil and gas sector. I've been working for Shell and for NNPC at very senior level, crafting these kind of policies. I've seen it worked. It worked in the oil and gas industry. For example, the NCDMB, which is basically the same thing, which is the Nigerian Content Development Policy. We did it in the oil and gas industry because almost everything that enables Nigeria to produce hydrocarbon, policies were made, I think it was during Obasanjo's era, to ensure it is Nigerian. Today, Nigeria as a country is proud. We're repairing ships in Lagos. That is huge foreign exchange that will have been taken to Korea and places like this, happening in Nigeria. Pipelines is a major leverage item for the oil and gas industry. It's happening in Nigeria. Now, what does this really mean for our country? In the procurement space, contracting and procurement, about 75% of government expenditure is spent on the acquisition of goods and services. What does that mean? Nigeria's budget for this year is about 49.7 trillion. That is humongous. That is some money. Now, what we're saying is if you take 37 trillion, which is about 75% of that amount, acquiring goods and services, if you can save 10, 20% of that, there'll be a lot of money left for government to develop other social standards. So this is why I believe that we're lucky to have a strategic thinker in the Renew Hope agenda, and with the appointment of the several professional guys at the BPP, it cannot be a better time than now. And I believe that government have to live by their own words. They have to set standards and show example. So, as you did said, it shouldn't be for the common man. Buy Nigeria must start from the top. We should use that example, personal examples of governance, to let it percolate down to the generality of Nigerians. We're having Jackpot syndrome. People are leaving this country. Loads of Nigerians have knowledge. We are selling our own knowledge to the outside world. We can utilize that in country. So there's a lot of opportunity. It will promote transparency in the procurement of goods and services. It will enhance accountability, also promote ethical behavior and spread opportunities to everyone. So I think we cannot have a better time than now to start.
All right, Prof, thank you very much. Let me quickly get to Nelson Hunbofore. And I've heard some argue that strict local content rules could affect quality and delivery. How can we strike a balance between patriotism and performance in this case?
Thank you so much for being here. And I want to laud this government for coming with the idea of banning the importation of those goods that are locally manufactured and that are of standard. Because so much of our funds, our foreign exchange, have been spent outside this nation. And delivery of goods that are within the country would be much easier, cheaper, and more economical to reach the crannies of this nation. And this policy, which government has put in place, which will soon be effective, all things being equal, will go a long way to bring into force the importance of procurement. Because procurement itself is the welfare of every nation. If you look at the budget of nations, like my colleagues rightly said, about 80 to 90% are spent on public procurement. So if those funds are harnessed within the nation, and the foreign goods, which, the local goods which are competing virtually with the foreign goods, are patronized, and the local consultants are equally patronized instead of the foreign consultants, you consult so much of the funds of this nation. And the issue of this Nigeria First best policy, I look at it as a saving policy for this country, and that if we consider the nation first in our attitudes, in the way we procure, acquire the goods and services to the citizenry, it will surely give us value for money. And this policy should not only be on just the goods locally manufactured and the banning of the foreign goods, but we as citizens must also structure ourselves to consider Nigeria first. Our leaders, our politicians, ourselves at the lower level, we must think of Nigeria first. Otherwise, this policy will not go anywhere. If the elites are not considering Nigeria first in patronizing the locally made goods, and they go behind the door to bring in the foreign goods for their consumption, basically we won't be achieving anything much. But I believe this current DG will certainly, because he understands the principles and what he needs to do to make it right, I believe he will surely ensure that it is implemented, because implementation has been the problem of procurement. So many times you see that those guidelines are there, but a few people only comply with the processes. And this implementation, if there's strict, punishment for those who violate it, because that's what we are lacking in the procurement sector. Many people will not do it right because they know nothing will happen. Even if you go out on procurement audit today and find out that some people deserve to be reprimanded for complicity, they get to understand that, after all, it will not be of any significance when they are reported or the reports are prepared. So if we do not start to implement what we see outside of these violations by actors, the procurement actors, believe me, we won't be going anywhere, because it's just be like we're recycling the same thing over and over, because people knew that even if they don't do it, nothing will happen.
All right, many thanks, Mr. Handumafori. Let's get back to Mr. Ekwenko now. Thinking about all of this, I would like to ask if you think that this policy is coming at the right time. I ask that because the manufacturing sector, those who are into local production, we know the challenges at the moment. Most of them are not functioning optimally. Now you talk about Nigeria First policy. What's the guarantee that, we can be able to produce what we need? Just a few days ago, we're talking about the clothing industry on this program. We talked about the challenges, the fact that we cannot, the industries are not functioning optimally. Now you say Nigeria First. So, are we going to go naked very soon? Because, that sector is really not functioning optimally at the moment. So are we going to be able to take care of ourselves, considering the fact that the manufacturing sector is faced with so many challenges?
Yeah. First, I'd like to say that on the question as to is this the right time, I'd like to say that, this is something we should have done many years ago. Let's be upfront and clear. Every country, most countries that I know, have used public procurement to drive local industry. And so it's a good thing that the current government is focusing on it. There's no doubt about that. In fact, for me, there is no alternative to it. Where we are, where our economy is currently, there's no alternative to it. Now, as to whether our industries can meet up, I don't know any country that focused on local content and local production because their industries could meet up. Often, countries have focused on local content and local production to ensure that their industries meet up, to create the environment to enable their industries to meet up, to create the need for people to invest to ensure that their industries meet up. So I rather look at it the other way around, that yes, this is needed to achieve what you're talking about. And let me give you a typical example. Maybe I'll just tell a little story about India. Many years ago, I went to India, and as I was crossing the airport, there were these huge scanners, very large, like locomotive scanners. And I was wondering, why are these people using this kind of scanners? And I checked it out. It was a local company. The Indian government had given the contract to a local company. Fast forward, 2 years ago, I went to India. and I saw very sleek scanners they were using. I said, oh, these people have changed these scanners. I checked the name. It was the same local company, and apparently government had encouraged them to improve, giving them forward orders, and they are the same company that was manufacturing those, large, almost locomotive scanners, now had very sleek, wonderful scanners. Let me ask, for example, if the Nigerian government, for example, had supported a company like Innocent, assuming all government vehicles in Nigeria are bought from all of the local, assembly plants, these companies will be ruling Africa now. So you don't need to wait for when the companies are ready. We should rather use policy to drive their growth.
I wonder why you're so optimistic about that. I'll give a simple example.
Yes.
Some years ago, we stopped the importation of rice.
Yes.
And we know what happened to that commodity in the market. I mean, average Nigerian could no longer afford it. We couldn't boost our production capacity.
What did government do when it stopped importation of rice? Did government do anything to increase the production of rice? That's the question. So it's not just about stopping importation. It's about what measures do you put in place immediately to drive production. And that's where procurement, when you create the incentives you create matters. For example, if investors know now that Nigeria is not going to be buying imported cars. Let's give an example. The likelihood is that there's going to be a lot of investment into those local assembly plants. If they can trust that Nigeria would keep to this policy for the next 5 years, the direct result will be a lot of investment into those vehicles. And the good thing again is that the Bureau for Public Procurement has begun already, even before this policy in the last 2 days. The new standard bidding document issued by the current DG of Bureau for Public Procurement has a scheme to support local contractors, to support local production, and to support locally manufactured goods. And so I'm positive. I'm positive that this can be done. It is possible. It's doable. There are things, of course, more things that we need to do, and we can speak to it if we have time on this program. But it's doable.
All right. Thank you, Chibuzo. I'm just thinking, Professor Afolabi, how this Nigeria First policy aligns with broader national development, goals. I'm imagining we've heard America First, and we know what they did with that. I would like to see similarities. In other words, are we going to be driving this policy with the same vigor and, determination we see with the America First policy of President Trump, for instance?
I think that's a very, very good question you've raised. We have no alternatives. And the world is changing. The opportunities are there now, a lot better than it used to be. Clear example, tech. Let's go through the blockchain industry. Today, the misconception in Nigeria is the fact that there's not enough money to create local industries or to help them. That's not correct. The real practice in the global economy right now, what people are doing and are making it sustainable, is tokenization. You tokenize your assets. You give everybody opportunity. You give everybody opportunity to participate. What do I mean? If government open its doors, China, Korea, Japan, they are major vehicle manufacturers. You allow a few of those countries, like Innocent I heard, to come into Nigeria and you tokenize their assets. And you guarantee that no other vehicle, for example, in terms of vehicles, will be imported into this country. You make mandatory government official vehicles must be this brand. It used to be Peugeot. And you tokenize those assets. There is no way this will not work. And what's more, everything we are concentrating now is on federal government. It shouldn't be so. I expect every state governor in Nigeria, they all have Bureau for Public Procurement. I expect every state assembly to come up with this regulation and support government policy and says that we are buying local. You are buying local because if my good friend from the World Bank was talking about sanctions, there are a lot of corporates who people don't believe in what is written. But if you say it is not only for federal government, it's for state government, and there are state policies to back this up, then we all move in the same direction. So for me, blockchain technology has made it so easy. In fact, Stop fossil fuel, for example. Invest in solar energy. Power is a problem in Nigeria. The only way you can buy Nigeria if there's continuous or constant power. Allow companies to come in here and invest and tokenize their asset. That's my key takeaway for myself. Tokenize the asset. Nigerians, there are a lot of Nigerians who want to invest in series of industries. Tokenize the assets, allow countries to come in, investors, they will bring their plants in here, and there will be stability and continuity of...
That sounds quite radical. And
is
that's
radical.
why I drew the comparison with the American First Policy.
Absolutely.
Because I wanted to see, would we have the determination and discipline to be that radical?
Absolutely.
You know, damn what every other person says and say this is the way we are going to go. Are we not going to compromise?
That's why I said President Tinubu is a strategic thinker. I was at Eagle Square the day he was sworn in, and I was watching his lips when the man said, I am putting a stop to, what's it called, this petroleum stuff.
Fuel subsidy.
You know? Yes. He put a stop to it. It takes guts to make certain radical decisions, and that's what our country needs. Today,
Okay.
Nigeria is going down unless you make difficult decisions. And Nigerians as a people should support government in those difficult decisions to make them work.
All right, many
so I'm
thanks.
calling on state governors, state governments to make local laws supporting this by Nigeria. That way it will work. It's not only for federal government.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Falabi. Just to let our viewers know that you can send questions, comments as regards this topic. The number is 0816-968-8126. It's also displayed on the screen. So I would like to read your messages. Let's get to Nelson now. You know, all of this looks very interesting. But you see, I've read, you know, some comments by some Nigerians about you know, those at the top, if they would really comply with this. I mean, he just talked about innocent, you know, and one of the comments by a Nigerian was, I mean, before coming up with this policy in the first place, we would have seen that, oh, maybe all ministries and, you know, even government officials have changed their vehicles to innocent. I mean, just to set an example. So when you're talking about the policy, Nigerians understand that, oh, yes, you're actually willing to go in this direction. Not just, you know, I mean, like you know, I tried to mention earlier, not just for the bottom, you know, it's having to see that those at the top, you know, actually comply with this. Speak to us really. What would be your expectation, really, you know, from those at the top, government officials, leaders, in whatever guise, you know, in order to ensure that this policy is sustained and it produces the desired impact?
Thank you. Just to correct my friend, I am not a World Bank staff, but I'm a consultant, procurement consultant working with the World Bank project. Okay, just to get that over, as I rightly mentioned earlier, this is a collective responsibility for all Nigerians, because the policy, as you know, introduced by the federal government, is meant to give and to improve lives of Nigerians in terms of value for money and a better living standard. The elites, as I earlier mentioned, all of us, is a period or a time of sacrifice. We must all look at this policy as a time as a change whose time has come, that we embrace this policy, and holistically Nigerians should accept the fact that in a nation's time, there must be that time when the rosy does not continue, and you have to face some difficulties along the way of your life. And as a result of this, I call upon all Nigerians, all without exceptions, from the top down to the bottom. The bottom are already used to it because they've been patronizing local products. But our elites, our politicians, they should join the queue to accept the reality that this has come to stay. That the issue of importing those luxurious things should no longer be the issue. We have local industries. Today, if you look around, you see so many, you know, individuals, families, women, young men that are jobless for the past 6-10 years. Today, they are doing one thing or the other, you know, in different industries. And if these younger ones are doing this and people are accepting and utilizing them, in a cheaper way and satisfying their own egos. I believe the Nigerian elites and the middle class should accept the fact that it's no more time for us to continue the direction we are going in the past, because this will not take us anywhere. Singapore and many other nations, China, they all closed their doors to importation. And today, they are great nations. In the past years, you can consider China as a third world country. But today, what America is doing, China is doing probably better. But if we cannot change our attitude, it will not work. Like I earlier said, implementation is the problem. Government should be strict on this issue, and even where there will be exemptions to some particular goods which are assumed not to be fully manufactured in Nigeria, it should be done with seriousness of investigations, and exemptions should be given only on the ground that those things are really not, particularly medical equipment and a few other things. You discover that at that time you will have no choice than to go than to import them from abroad. And government should categorically make it very clear that this group of items are the ones that can be imported and these ones cannot be imported. So that if this exemption is given out, it will be seen on that blanket note that all of this stuff that are coming in, there are items that are not locally manufactured. And so we live by that, and honestly, if we go by the way the government is planning to get this thing done, Nigeria will be a better place. And this Jaguar syndrome, I believe, will no longer be there, because they will be coming back to have their own local industries to manufacture what we can live on and then sustain this nation. Thank you.
Those, waivers that you talk about, I think there lies the worry of the ordinary Nigerian most of the time. So, Mr. Ekweku, I'll be asking you, Ekweku, from a legal and regulatory perspective, what are the implications of the Nigeria First policy on the current Public Procurement Act? Okay. Does it require amendment or just stricter, enforcement?
Let me say something first before I go to that, and that's a very good question. I think one of the things we should focus on is, what does government need to do to get this policy to work? I don't want us to lose that discussion. That's one very important thing we should focus in this discussion, and also all across board, all departments, all ministries should be asking themselves, what do we as government need to do? At the macro level, I think the federal government, President Tinubu's government, should focus on two major things. One is that it should find ways to raise low-cost financing that will go to small businesses. The government can raise bonds from the market, government-backed bonds that, give a lower rate, interest rate, access to finance to small, local and medium-level local businesses that want to manufacture. That's one. Two is, government must find a way to provide steady electricity. And because it's difficult to provide it across the country at the same time, I will advise that we focus on the cluster system. Find clusters, provide steady and subsidize the electricity to those clusters, and encourage companies to move to those places and produce. Like we were talking about earlier, we banned rice. What did we do to improve rice production? Now, if we want this to work, these two major things must be done. There are a number of other things that needs to be done, but I must move quickly to the question you asked me about the procurement law. We don't need an amendment of the procurement law for this to work. Of course, we can amend the law to improve its robustness in attacking these issues, but we don't need it to work. Now, if you look at the Public Procurement Act, which fortunately I helped to write in the first place, the law gives power to the Bureau for Public Procurement to make rules, to make, issue guidelines, and to issue standard bidding documents. It is these rules, these guidelines, that provide the details of how public procurement is carried out. If you recall earlier, when I was speaking earlier, I mentioned that even before this new policy pronouncement by Mr. President, that the leadership in the Bureau for Public Procurement issued a new standard bidding document about 2 months ago. That standard bidding document already provides a framework for ministries, departments, and agencies to implement, local content in many, areas. And I'll give you an idea of some of the, provisions of these, standard bidding documents, which incidentally, I helped to write. The standard bidding document has tried to redefine the preferences, the advantages, the privileges that, local or foreign contractors can get. For example, the standard bidding document says that you can't get a local preference as a contractor, or it tries to define local contractors and foreign contractors. And I say, to be a local contractor, first you've got to be registered in Nigeria. Nigerians should own at least 51% of your equity. And for specific jobs, for you to receive the advantages of a local contractor, at least 50% of your personnel who are implementing the work must be Nigerians. That's already, all these criteria are already in place. It talks about foreign bidders who, if you're bidding, even in an international competitive bid, for your bid to be, responsive to the bid solicitation, that you must show at a minimum that 40% of your inputs, whether in labor or materials, comes from Nigeria. That's already the rule issued 2 months ago, by which, procurement entities should carry out procurement. And that's why, I was saying that the new leadership at the Bureau seems to have understood, the critical steps that are required to, take this kind of policy forward. And we're already beginning to implement it before, the federal. So they put a framework in place for MDAs to begin to implement this policy. But what is important after that, now there's a framework, is I believe that anything you don't measure, you don't achieve. We must now put in place a framework to measure the performance of MDAs in implementing this policy. We need to be able to monitor, we need to check annually, how MDAs have implemented their budgets, to what extent they have complied with existing rules on implementing, Nigeria First or local policies. And we need to make the results public. The public needs to know that MDA A has achieved this level of compliance, MDA B has achieved this level of compliance. And that's when my colleague was talking about the elites, the top government officials. That's how we hold them accountable. So that if you're a minister and we see the records of your ministry's procurement and we see that your ministry has flouted completely the Buy Nigeria policy, and you're a politician, then the Nigerian people will know you don't believe in Nigeria. This is what needs to be done. And it needs to be done at all levels. We in the, civil society, we citizens, the press, we should also be looking at state government. I agree with Prof completely. We should be reporting the extent to which our state governments have put systems in place to ensure that local companies are not only being patronized, but they are growing. What kinds of support are they providing for local companies? We should report it. If possible, we should rate state governments across the country on their performance on this level, if we want it to work. And all of this should be in public. So there's a lot of good ideas, and I'm not sure we have all the time to discuss them, but I'm more about what can we do to help this policy work. Because like I said, we have no alternative. If we don't drive job creation, if we don't improve incomes, then we cannot solve the security problem. And we cannot deal with issues of education and health except we're able to, create better income for people. Because you can provide health facilities and then people cannot afford to go to.
All right. I think we're getting some messages already. Perhaps we just run through the ones we have at the moment, just to think about the way Nigerians are seeing it. And Engineer Moinyang from Jos says, greetings to all Nigerians. He says this policy is timely as it will help boost Nigeria's economy, but our local producers should not see it as a way of exploiting Nigerians and it says, God bless Nigeria. I have a second one. Nigeria is a country where a lot of good policies are made, but implementation is the problem. Please, what is the cause? That's from Alaji Garko from Karu site, Abuja.
All right, so you can still send in your messages at 0816-968-8126. I'll read some of the messages that I have, much later, but I'd like to get to you, Professor Folabi, and I'm thinking that one of the main issues in procurement in the country has been the hydra-headed monster, corruption. It's been a major problem. Yeah. How does this policy deal with that?
Well, unfortunately, procurement accounts for the highest degree corruption is attached to procurement. It's just so sad, both for goods and services. This policy will help in a lot of ways, because one of the easiest, if you look at the value chain of procurement, right from when people conceive the idea to buy, up to tendering, receiving, utilizing the goods and paying for the services, across the entire chain, there are elements of corruption on the way. The way to really tackle this is, if we buy Nigeria, you will see, you realize that the aspect of stealing money for foreign imports will completely reduce. If we buy Nigeria, there will be a lot of opportunity for the local manufacturers to tie their own knot at their own ends. So I believe that the policy will enhance capacity development, because then we're building capacity, people are getting to understand what they need to do, and they understand their roles better. So it's timely that we're having this policy, and if we can actually implement it, and measurement is the key thing. You go around, you ask entities, and people believe that this is actually for MDAs. It's not only for MDAs. State governments, local governments, and of course the private sector. This also involves the private sector. Huge amount of money. Probably the private sector spends almost as much as the federal government. If you look at the oil and gas industry, for example, if one entity like Shell or Chevron is spending $2 billion per annum, that outweighs what federal government is spending altogether. So it's not only federal government. It's federal government, state government, and the private sector.
Technically, it's everyone.
It's everyone, exactly.
Everybody.
Absolutely.
Every Nigerian. I mean, we're all in this. But you see, I want to ask, really, if you're trying to say that it's going to deal with corruption, of course, which is a big issue, as far as procurement is concerned. I want to ask that, coming up with this policy, before interfacing with those who should help this policy to survive, right? Would you say is a right step? I have to ask this again, because someone talked about electricity. We haven't solved that problem, right? Which is a big issue for a lot of industries and manufacturers, and for a lot of businesses to thrive. We haven't dealt with that. We haven't dealt with the security challenge, for example, in some parts. And some of other issues in terms of taxation and all that are affecting our manufacturing companies. Do you think that they would be able to measure up? I'm just thinking that in the next 5 years, short term, right? Short term, when this policy takes effect, do you think that we'll be able to survive, considering the fact that these other issues have not been dealt with?
Well, they go simultaneously. If you look at one of the things we're doing in SPSSC project, is to develop competency framework for people who are practitioners. People who steal money. Corruption in procurement is majorly around the procuring entities and the people, principal officers who carry out these functions. One of the things we're doing in that direction is to issue practice license. So people who are found guilty in certain malpractices are debarred from practicing in future. So you issue an annual practice license, you monitor their performances, you check their conduct, and anyone found wanting. It's not that the laws are down there. The laws are there, the policies are there, but it's effective monitoring and reporting that is really, really lacking. And now that has been solved.
The reason I ask that, really, is because, don't you foresee people going through the back door? Say, import, change the labels to Nigerian companies in a bid to meet this, policy demand?
We shouldn't look at the negative side of human behavior. I think we should focus.
I'm asking because of the production capacity at the moment.
You are right. You are right. I mean, this will happen. There's no way they won't happen. We see them. We see drugs. When you go back to the chemist and buy a drug, you see a number there, they'll tell you, call NAFDAC. And if you type a certain sets of numbers, it tells whether it's fake or not. These are also policies, local policies, to ensure that we catch those infringements. So for me, wrong things will happen, no doubt about it. But it is curtailing the degree of those things and moving forward, ensuring that there is consistency in the application of the policy.
All right.
That matters.
All right. Thank you, Prof. Now, I'm just wondering, and I'll throw that to Nelson, what mechanisms you think should be in place, to monitor adherence to the new procurement guidelines and ensure that sanctions are fairly and effectively applied. Now, there is a policy, I don't know if it's a policy or a recent rule that procurement officers be deployed to MDAs. Does this help to achieve the consistency that we desire in terms of implementation?
Thank you. Wherever you post these officers, it doesn't change anything. The most important thing is their ability to comply to the procurement procedures. I keep on talking about the elites. They must comply with the processes and procedures. You see, we have the biggest problem of wanting to award our contracts to my brother, to my friend, to my wife's sister, to my wife. This syndrome, if we don't kill it, this policy will not succeed.
So how do we ensure compliance?
We have to ensure compliance in this regard by the Bureau of Public Procurement insisting on regular and constant audit of all MDAs. On regular basis, this audit exercise must be carried out, and every MDA that is found wanting should properly be sanctioned.
I have sorry, I'm so sorry.
No problem.
I have an insight, a supporting insight to that. That question you ask and the direction it's going. I think it's very important. Why? If ministries are posting people, procurement officers, to entities, what do? Ministers control them. Ministers, they are really worried. This is what's happening practically.
And then they see it as a lucrative posting.
Absolutely. But if BPP is responsible for the posting of these officers, they know where their career lies. So you infringe, there are set rules. Disciplinary action, there are set rules. And practice license, your license will be withdrawn and debarred. But most of these issues, infringements, comes from the MDAs. Because the officers, the directors who are there, tell them, do it this way. And if you don't do it this way, you get into trouble. And those guys who are sufficient guts, because they know that that's the guy who has the annual report. But now when you reverse it back to the old order, where the directors of procurement, their career is managed by the BPP, as Mr. President has pronounced now, I think we're in the right direction. Any action that they are being asked to take by any ungodly or unethical action that they're being asked to take by the MDAs, they know there's a home to report to. And when they report to the BPP DG, they know that they can be protected. That is what is worrying our officers, protection. And this policy has made room for that.
All right, let's read some more messages, okay?
Also, I've not finished, actually.
Okay, go ahead.
So actually, on the posting matter, even in the Bureau of Public Procurement, if the officers that are in charge of posting are not disciplined, that they are rightly going to do it the proper way, just like they are supposed to follow the procurement guidelines. We always digress from going on these principles, the regulations. We feel, oh, this is a long process, I won't follow it. This is a shorter process, I will follow it. Look, there is no any shortcut that you take when you're driving a car that you don't get potholes on the way. And you will meet the potholes when you take the shortcut in procurement process. And so no matter how long it takes, the process must be followed. And the posting by the BPP even, they must ensure that the officers on the posting desk are doing the right posting of the right staff. It's not because somebody has come to find his way of influencing the posting to a lucrative place that you can post him. Look at the qualification, the capabilities before they are posted. And I will still emphasize, that the issue of I am not doing it the right way and awarding the contract to the rightful candidate, I want to give it to somebody who has been patronizing me or my friend or my relation. This thing will never work, this policy. I will still consist to insist on the fact that if we do not, I know we cannot implement this policy 100%, because certainly there are other, issues that will come along the way. You find yourself, playing the other side. But let us, in as much as we can, that all of us, holistic as Nigerians, try to go by the processes of the procurement process. That I don't care who your face is. If you are not in line with the procedures, so be it. Because by the time you have when you have problems in procurement is when you award these contracts to persons you like, because they will disappoint you.
Okay, many thanks, Nelson. Some messages that we've got, by the way, the number is still on your screen. You can send WhatsApp messages or SMS, and just know that you can follow us on all social media platforms. All of those handles are also on the screen. Some messages here. This one says, Nigeria's first procurement policy for local growth is a very good policy that will move Nigeria forward economically. However, implementation of our policies is key to its success. It would therefore recommend that unnecessary waivers should not be granted in our procurement process. And that's coming from Bello Muhammad. Olu Bakinde Ahmed says, procurement plan of every organization and specification of the goods should be forwarded to the BPP for scrutiny before publication. Ali Elias says, Nigeria First is a very good policy, a strategic one at that. However, the presidency and state governments should demonstrate leadership in this regard. Olu Bakinde, AA, says, procurement audits and project supervision should be taken seriously by the BPP. You have some messages?
All right, I have a couple to take here. And good morning, I'm Abbas Abubakar Sahad from Jalingo, Taraba State. Nigeria's procurement policy for local growth is vital for boosting local industries and creating jobs, among other benefits. However, how does the government intend to address these key challenges, such as weak enforcement of local content laws and political interference, for the policy to achieve its goals? I think we've dealt with that just a while ago. And Oyemo Milara Oluwaseun says President Tinubu needs to be more radical and strict on this policy, just like President Trump. That's the only way we can get it right. All the government parastatals must comply first before it can be enforced on the citizens. Interesting. I think it's largely what we've been talking about, that the elites will have to lead by example. And where they fall short, there must be, sanctions in place. It's all down to implementation.
Talking about sanctions, what kind of sanctions should be put in place in all of this?
There are a lot of existing sanctions. A lot of infractions in the procurement process amount to criminal offenses. Though, technically speaking, unfortunately, is that the Public Procurement Act 2007, the provisions on offenses wasn't very strong. So,
really?
Yes, because you see, people think that provisions on sanctions are strong when there's high sanction, right? But provisions on sanctions are stronger when the provisions have ensured that there's a process, to get to conviction. When the process to the definition of the offenses and the sanctions are such that getting to a determination of liability is difficult, then it has issues. I think that's a whole discussion for a new program on, offenses, in the procurement sector. But that's not to say that there are no sanctions. There are even administrative sanctions that are you can simply apply. The civil service has rules. People who offend the rules, there are procedures for applying sanctions, even if those ones are applied. Secondly, you can also remove people from positions when they offend. So there are administrative, ways to administer a sanction. But even more important It's when we have robust reporting systems. The naming and shaming also can help get people, to comply. And that's the point I was making about that we should create a system that ensures that every NDA reports on its compliance and implementation of this policy publicly. So that, for example, quarterly, MDAs should issue reports on how they have implemented their procurements and how it has addressed this policy.
And it won't be cooked?
Well, if they cook it, then it's the duty of me and you to look at those reports, and that's where I'm going to really. There are things government needs to do, but there are also things me and you as citizens need to do, and we should engage this process. There are many NGOs out there who work on these issues. They should get more critical. They should get more effective. They should push more. So, but first is that we should have a monitoring framework, a monitoring and reporting framework that ensures that everybody accounts for how much he or she has implemented it. And that framework will look at the fact that if you say, for example, as a minister that you're implementing the policy, somebody should look at the car you drive every day and tell us whether it's local or it's foreign.
Yeah.
We should look at the things you use and report publicly whether they are local or foreign. We should go that far.
So I'm just thinking if the sanctions are going to work then, because who's going to be sanctioning who? Because those who will be sanctioning will probably be using foreign-made goods too.
No, you see, the point is there are different levels of sanctions, and you can achieve 100% this at the same time. But I'm looking at both the soft side and the hard side. And the mistake we make often is that sometimes we think of the hard side alone. But if you, combine together
whose responsibility is it in the first place to put those sanctions on?
There are many people that have responsibilities in the framework. BPP does have its responsibilities. The accounting officers do have their responsibilities.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, also, the political heads do have responsibilities to sanction people.
Yeah. Unfortunately,
that rarely works.
And that's why I'm asking, because, these people you just mentioned, don't they use foreign-made goods too? So how do they sanction?
I guess we can take that after the break. We've got to go on this break now so that when we come back, we can continue the conversation. There are a lot of issues to address, and we will do after this break. Listen, many thanks for staying with us. We've been discussing the Nigeria First policy, and I guess I've been doing justice to that. Just to continue our conversation, I would like to read a few more messages that we've received while we went on that break. And Tolu Odufua says, "Good morning, everyone. I commend the NTA presenters for incorporating local content into their attire. However, I noticed that the discussants didn't follow suit. It would be great to see them wear outfits made from locally produced fabrics.
It's wrong.
Let's practice what we preach." These are just my candid observations, okay? And Mohammed from Okene in Kogi State says, "Good morning, Nigeria. Procurement policy is key to national development. Sincerity of purpose must be exhibited by the relevant authorities for the good of our country. May God help us." And finally, for this policy to work, the government must ensure transparent tendering, strict enforcement of local content requirements, and capacity building support for smaller emerging businesses.
Right.
Without accountability and fairness, the policy risks becoming just another document. But if done right, it can transform our economy from the ground up.
All right, I have some more messages here, but talking about the local content and Nigerian fabrics, another question you would ask is, it may be Nigerian design, but was it produced in Nigeria? Because I hear that even the common Adire now, Adire, tie and dye, they now produce it in China and bring into the country, which is a big issue. So, we need to deal with all of this. This one here says, the new procurement policy, if properly implemented, can correct preference for foreign goods by giving priority to Nigerian companies, especially in key sectors like agriculture and food processing. Undogu Peter Suliagbo, Managing Director, is the one sending this. We'll have some more messages, but of course we'll take them much later. The number is still on your screen. Don't forget the number is 0816-968-8126. SMS and WhatsApp messages only. Please do not call the number. We expect to see your messages. All right.
You
want to react to some of the questions, to the comments?
Yes. First of all, I'm going to say the gentleman or the lady who wrote about local fabric is wrong. This was made in Abuja, sewn in Abuja, and I'm very proud to wear
Well, maybe,
it.
maybe the fabric was imported.
Well, see, you just have to start from somewhere. You have to start from somewhere. I went to a local tailor, sold me something, and I like what I sold.
But I doubt if Nelson can say the same.
No, but the fact that I appear English doesn't mean that this material is not local.
Of course.
We have local suits sewers in this country that are even of better quality than the imported suits.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Now, one comment I really want to make, which I think it's fundamental to this discussion, is the issue of implementation. And it has been said earlier on that every Nigerian has a duty to ensure that this policy is followed. What do? We're pushing back to NTA, for example. If you have the political will and the political guts, what you should do is to support BPP when BPP publishes its report of every MDA that has bought Nigeria in their program, in their quarterly report. Let's have this forum every month where we say to Nigerians, look at the report, and there will be professionals like us who will discuss those reports. And Nigerians will see that the cars driven by the State House, the furniture in the minister's office is produced and bought in Nigeria. That way, there will be visibility. Nigerians will begin to trust in their leaders. And when Nigerians have trust in their leader, hopefully they will imbibe the policy themselves.
But would you call, for example, say a furniture where 90% of the materials used in producing it are foreign, but the assemblage, if you like, everything is Nigeria, would you call that local content?
You will start from somewhere. Honestly speaking, there might be...
That's less foreign than
Yeah,
the one that was just
that's
wholesale.
absolutely.
Can I just chip in?
Yeah.
You see, the perspective that a product would immediately, at inception, be 100% local is really a bit of fallacy. It doesn't work that way in practice. Localization is often gradual. And that's why if you look at the rules, when you use procurement rules to drive localization, it often is gradual. It goes in percentages. Like now, the current standard bidding document says that it in fact identifies specific things that must be procured locally. For example, vehicles. The bidding document is just issued. It says vehicles should be procured from local assembly plants. And it says local assembly plants. Why? Because we know full manufacturing is not occurring. Now, perhaps in 3-4 years' time, that will change to locally manufactured. That's how it works. You don't immediately legislate into being something that's not already in being, but you gradually, move it up. And that's how you will say it. But then, the system also then has to monitor. And you have to create incentives that enable the industries themselves to get in. And people in government have to show example, because the example they show is what drives confidence. Investors need to know that these guys are serious. And once they know these guys are serious, they will invest in producing. And the way for them to know that you're serious are the measures that you've taken. Like I pointed out earlier, you see, one of the greatest problems on the part of production today, or two biggest problems, access to cheap capital, electricity. Right? Now, can we solve that in a measured way? We can't suddenly give power to the whole of Nigeria. Anybody's saying that, it's just not saying the truth. But can we give power, subsidized power, to some clusters that are widespread across the country, and then encourage industries to move into those clusters? I think that's possible. That's doable, and government can achieve that. Can we raise capital below the market rate for these industries? Yes, we can. We have a robust bond market, and capital is being raised by private companies every other day. If government backs certain instruments tomorrow, they will get capital. Okay, today our banks are lending at 35%, 40%. Nobody can produce with that rate. But with a government-backed instrument, we can get interest rates of 17, 18, 19, 20%.
In addition to that, blockchain technology tokenized.
Exactly.
Nigerians will participate.
And then, yeah, once we've raised that capital,
Yeah.
we must make sure that that money goes to the industries, in those targeted industries where we know we have comparative advantage and that we can, ramp up.
All right.
These are the things, we need to do.
Thank you, Chibuzo. And Nelson, I'm just wondering, how important is interagency coordination? How important will that be in all of this? And you want to also check what will be the role of consultants like you in supporting the rollout?
We've been discussing about goods. Thank you for bringing the consultancy aspect of it, which will, touch a little bit. Collaboration between MDAs is very critical in the sense that they can build themselves into a capacity warehouse by exchanging amongst themselves some of the procedures and strategies they use in getting right goods to the right place, right services to the right place. And Nigeria first, in terms of services, would have to be taken seriously. We procure medical services. We travel out on, medical jamboree to be attended to medically abroad. If we are saying Nigeria first, then our elites and others must learn to procure their medical services within Nigeria as being Nigeria first. Nigerian services first. And so when we get ourselves into that, we will basically be widening the scope of our procurement in covering the goods and the services. The works aspect of it is already, in most cases, localized. Rarely, as in the past, when you can see some foreign contractors coming from abroad, bidding from abroad to carry out constructions in Nigeria. This aspect is almost gone. But if the MDAs will collaborate within themselves, because capacity building is one thing which government itself does not give much concern. Even some international agencies, some of them neglect the issue of capacity building, because you cannot ask somebody to come and, carry out a process that will save money and give value for money. I don't put him properly on the way to do it. So when that capacity is built, of course, there will be good performance. And also remuneration. The guys doing the procurement process needs to be properly remunerated so that these hanky-pankies that are going on, water passing under the bridge, will not be there. And when they get to some level of satisfaction that they are paid properly, that might not be fully stopped, but it will reduce that tension of wanting to get in the person who will give me in return what I needed to get it moved. That will never, ever give us what we are looking for. Because once value for money is not driven, is not obtained in a procurement process, let's forget it. It will never work.
You talked about services and talked about medical trips and all of that. We should also add vacations, add MDAs who have trainings outside the country and have retreats and all of that. I mean, that would do a lot for us. This one says there are some sections of the PPA 2007 that talks about imprisonment without an option of any fine for circumvention. Our problem is enforcement and compliance. If we can abide by the existing laws, we'll go a long way for a better Nigeria. This is Matthew James Abuga from Abuja. As we begin to round up the conversation, Prof, I would like to get to you. I would like to hear what your recommendations are, really, so that this doesn't just, it's not just a policy on paper. It's
Let it not
reality.
be a talk shop only.
Exactly.
And as we all have contributed, implementation is key, compliance is key, monitoring is key. And I'm going to go back to what I said earlier on, saying that we will need you to collaborate. We will need you because people see you, they see your programs. So let's have an opportunity where we'll come back here on a periodic basis get expert Nigerians to come and evaluate the reporting performance of MDAs. Starting from the federal government, every ministry, what have they done? How much have they bought Nigeria? We will help the BP to develop that framework. We'll develop the framework with BP. BP will publish it and send it to all MDAs. And not only federal government, state government as well. That's where the atrocities are committed. Because, you know why? I do not think that the federal government have a lot of hold on the Director General of BPP in terms of forcing him to do things. But I'm aware that at the state level, there are a lot of state governors who says, I put you there, you deliver. And that's where we need to put our focus on. Let the state government also be put on the benchmark of reporting and challenging the reports that are sent out. And let's make it public. When reports are public, Nigerians can comment on them, Nigerians can see those reports, and they can see the level of performance. And when we do that, Nigerians will begin to believe in themselves, that their leaders are doing the right thing, and of course, they have to follow.
All right, I would like to hear your thoughts.
Yes,
Chibuzo.
like I've said, we need to drive cheap capital to industries. Secondly, we need to try and provide subsidized power to industries. Thirdly, BPP needs to continue the process it has started already. It's just launched a new certification program for compliance officers, and the standard building documents is there. It's developing some further tools that needs to continue. The responsibility for procurement officers has rightly been placed with the BPP. The legislature needs to get involved. One of the biggest challenges with the procurement system today is constituency projects. They constitute the greatest negative driver of non-compliance in the system, because legislators focus on ensuring that their own nominated persons do these jobs, and it puts a lot of pressure on procurement officers and the entire system. We need to see the legislature show an example also. Then also our political leaders across board need to show example by what they buy, what they use, what they do. Then we Nigerian citizens, this should be a national campaign of buy Nigeria, eat Nigeria, live Nigeria. That's what countries do. That's what people do to drive their economies. We all, in our little ways, must not only begin to buy Nigeria, but also we should be to do things that support, Nigerian products. And then finally, like I said, anything you don't measure, anything you can't measure, you can't, achieve. Let's have a system that measures how well we're doing. First, a system that captures where we are currently, and that's easy to do. Where we are is clear. And then that measures, where we're going, who is doing what, how is it being done.
In terms of measurement, would it not impact on, say, employment level, the economy, what our naira would be in terms of exchange and all of that? Would all of this not have
It will impact on it, but remember there are many other factors impacting on those things too. So if you don't measure directly what these are, the level of impact these are having on it, then you won't be able to determine whether the Buy Nigeria is working or is not working.
Okay. So, and we hear that the BPP is expected to roll out implementation action guidelines on the Nigeria First policy. But how soon is that likely to happen? How soon can Nigerians expect it? And is there a place for technology in all of this to make it work better? Maybe Prof would help with that.
I mentioned that earlier on. There's a place for technology. The blockchain technology is doing wonders. We're helping a lot of other countries in Africa using technology to manage procurement. So BPP is already on that journey now. And Nigeria will change because procurement is a big deal.
So when will we see the rollout of action guidelines, implementation action guidelines?
Well, something was launched even last week by the BPP. That's on the Sustainable Procurement Competency Framework. Yeah, but the implementation guideline for this one, I believe, BPP is not here, but I believe in the next few weeks, Nigerians will see something positive from BPP, ruling out the guidelines.
All right, Nelson, I would like to hear your final thoughts on this matter.
In a minute.
Yeah. Just to borrow from a statement of one of the northern emirs, that the time for talks is over. All these talks, this should not happen. We have come now to Nigeria First. The talks of before now should be over. Let's now go into action. People who are not doing it right, they shouldn't be allowed to continue doing it wrong.
All right.
And BPP, trusting the fact that the BPP itself, they have the capabilities, and particularly the current DG, he has the strength and the understanding and knowledge to be able to get some of the enforcement procedures for each violators that should be enforced.
All right.
I like the fact that everybody here seems to have the confidence in the current BPP DG. He's been here, I think, a couple of times this year, if I'm not mistaken, you know. And I like that, because if there is confidence in the driver of a process, well, you have one part of the problem solved, and then you can then follow suit with the rest of them. Yeah, Ray.
All right. Many thanks for joining us for this conversation. We do sincerely appreciate you, Professor Bola Afolabi, Senior Procurement Specialist Consultant, Sustainable Procurement, Environment and Social Standard Enhancement, Bureau of Public Procurement and World Bank Project. Many thanks for being our guest. Thank you so much. Chibuzo Ekwenkwo, Aheneku and Ekweko Law Partnership, a lawyer and public procurement specialist. Thank you so much. We do sincerely appreciate you. Of course, Nelson Andrumofori, Senior Procurement Consultant, Camfield Limited, and Procurement Management Firm and World Bank Assisted Agile Project. Many thanks for being our guest. You're all in the procurement space, so we hope that you can all change the narrative. Thank you so much for being our guest. So that's Good Morning, Nigeria, this Friday. Thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend. I'm Yen Ray John. I live aloft in the NTA.
And I'm Victor Azu. I'll see you again on Monday.